Good morning, kids. It's Lori from Nourish. It's been a while. I can't believe how long it's been since I've done a video. And this morning is just beautiful. And I'm going to walk you through in two parts how I make basil pesto with no oil. So here's the basil that's already been plucked pretty clean this morning. This is my second harvest from the basil. It's really done well this year, and I already took in one big bowl, and I'm going to be bringing this in. But I thought I would just show you the outside here before we go inside and look at the ingredients for the basil pesto. I've got my tiger lilies coming into bloom. Short-lived but beautiful. This particular plant, I am not sure I know what it is, but it's just gorgeous, and it came out of nowhere. We actually knocked down something a couple of years ago, and for some reason something else decided to come up. We've got some dwarf sunflower plants here that are progressing. We've got last year's chives that came out in full form. We've got kind of a sad tomato plant here. Too much sun, I believe. Two kinds of squash, which are encroaching on everybody here in the garden. I think the one in the front is going to be butternut squash, and the one in the back is zucchini. We've got kale that's being plowed over. Swiss chard, which needs to be used. This tomato plant went bonkers and pulled the cage right up out of the ground, so we've got to secure that down. We've got tomatoes growing here very well. A couple different varieties. The one that is pulling the cage up are cherry tomatoes. We've got some peppers, and for some oddball reason, in the middle of the garden, up sprouted a tomato plant that must have, I don't know whether seeds blew over from the other. I have no idea, but we've got Hungarian sweet peppers, I think jalapenos, maybe, and a regular sweet pepper. And it's Greenville here. So let's go on in and I'll show you the rest of the ingredients for the pesto. Let me take my shoes off. It's kind of tricky doing this with one hand. Alright. Close the screen door. It's a glorious day. Glorious day. Loving it. All right. So let's go on in the kitchen and I'll show you the ingredients. I am positive that doing a video and then doing another one and linking them together into one is totally possible. I would bet money on it. I just don't know how to do it yet, and I need to force myself to learn. It's going to be easy, I'm sure. But so I will do one video showing you the ingredients. I'll put together the pesto, and then I'll do another video showing you the end product. So we have basil here. Now, what we've got on the basil, and I don't know if it's noticeable on all these leaves. Here you go. Some little beetle guy was chewing on the basil, and so we put cayenne pepper on the plant, and the beetle action stopped. So what I have to do now is really thoroughly rinse off the cayenne pepper, get this nice and clean. I will actually give you the ingredients. I will do them now, and I'll do them at the end as well. And I will probably blog about it also. But this is a no oil pesto using tofu. And the only way that I would suggest using soybeans is going organic. This is a Kroger Simple Truth Organic Tofu. So we know that it's non-GMO. That's the only way I would suggest using a soy product. So we've got tofu in the recipe, a whole block of it. Let's go back to it here. This is, the recipe actually calls for half a block, but I double the recipe. It makes no sense to not use the whole block at one time, although it keeps pretty well. This, by the way, is a gluten-free food, which makes sense because it's coming from a whole food, but just an FYI for people who are looking for gluten-free, it is gluten-free, and it's also kosher, according to the little symbol. So we're good all around here. So this is let me see the weight on this. Why isn't the weight on it? Anyway, it's a block of tofu. I think it all comes in the same size. So you're going to use a whole block. Here's the recipe, which, yeah, there you can see it. And this came out of my Forks Over Knives cookbook. So we're whole food, plant-based, no added sugar, salt, or oil. Now this recipe does say salt to taste, and I did put a little in, but we're not overdoing that by any means. So we needed 4 cups of packed basil. So what I have in the sink and what I have here in this bowl will give me the 4 cups that I need. I'm going to toast some pine nuts, and these are organic pine nuts from Garden Patch Market. They're kind of pricey, but what I plan on doing with this basil pesto, which I did with the other batch I made, I put them in small containers and froze them. I can pull them out in small portions, and we'll talk in the next video about how you can use this. So I'm going to toast up the pine nuts, half a cup of pine nuts. So you've got a whole block of tofu, you've got a half a cup of toasted pine nuts, and all you got to do with this is fire up the heat, just low. And I guess that's a contradiction in terms, isn't it? Fire up the heat low. Turn on the heat low. And just kind of jiggle the pan periodically until you smell the aroma. They might darken a little, but you smell that aroma of the nut, and then turn it off. So it's just a light toasting. I'm also going to be using fresh lemon juice, and the recipe, I've got to refer here. The recipe calls for, I'll put my camera over there while I'm talking, hopefully. The recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. So I'm going to double that. So I'm going to have 4 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. It calls for 4 garlic cloves, peeled and chopped for half of what I'm doing. I like garlic, but I like to tone it down a little. So I'm probably going to put maybe 2 or 3 cloves of garlic in the whole thing. So garlic is always to taste. You know, whatever you can tolerate. If you can't take it, then leave it out. So 4 cups of the basil, a half a cup of the pine nuts toasted, garlic to your preference, 4 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice, salt to taste, and your packed basil, package of tofu, and we're going to be using a half a cup of nutritional yeast. And this is not the kind of yeast that you make beer with. It's not the kind of yeast that you bake bread with. It's a plant-based yeast that has it's got a kind of a yellowy color to it. It imparts kind of a nutty or cheesy, if you will, flavor to whatever you're adding it to. When I make my vegan nacho cheese, quote-unquote, sauce, I use this, and it gives it that cheesy taste. but it's also going to give the dish some structure too, because it's a powder. So that's a half a cup of that's going to go in. And this is so easy because once you toast the pine nuts, you're going to simply put everything into the food processor. You're going to process it. I noticed that it took, a while. I kind of scraped down the sides a few times, and it took a while until it took on that pesto consistency. Everything's going to be blended and incorporated, and it's going to take on that green color of the basil and give you this really nice pesto. So I'm going to stop this video right now. I'm going to go ahead and wash my basil and get everything done and ready, and then I will show you the end product, and I'll also show you the containers that I'm going to freeze this in, and I'll give you some ideas for how you can use this pesto. So once you've gone through this process, picking it was probably the most time-consuming part of the whole thing, and the rest is so easy thanks to my lovely food processor that was given to me by a very dear friend. Thank you, Terry. I think I've said this on a video before. I really wanted a food processor, but it wasn't in the budget. And I just started thinking, wow, I really want a food processor. And I truly believe I manifested it. Terry, my friend Terry's mother-in-law had passed away, and they had a lot of her kitchen things in their basement. And she said, I've got this in my basement. I said, okay, well, how much would you like for it? And she said, no, but yours. So it's been a real blessing, and works just like a champ. It's a food processor that came from JCPenney, but it does the trick. So I will stop for now, and I will see you soon in the next video. Bye.